every day. I appreciate it. Joining us now, I want to go to the Middle East columnist and contributor writer live in Australia from Inside Arabia. You want to go to insiderarabia.com. That's insiderarabia.com. Sign up for that. It is my now go-to news and analysis website on the Middle East and what is going on. Go to insiderarabia.com, insiderarabia.com. And joining me now is CJ Werleman, live from Australia. Hey, CJ, are you on the line?
Hey, I'm John. How are you doing?
You're calling from Australia where it is 10:40 p.m., right? Time for bed.
I don't mind. That's exactly. I'm burning the midnight oil.
I know, right? Now, where exactly are you calling from, CJ, in Australia?
In Sydney.
Okay, so you're in Sydney, Australia. CJ is a writer, contributor, and analyst for Inside Arabia. Go to insiderarabia.com. My source of news now for the Middle East. It's the best thing you're going to find out there today in giving you straight-up analysis and the news on what is going on in the Middle East. As you know, we cover it here on the John Fredericks Show in depth. Other people, my competitors, don't cover it, CJ, because it's too hard to understand, basically. They have to do too much work. You had a... it's a very complicated situation, right? See, my competitors, they like to get...
Me too.
They like to get up and just, they get the newspaper and read you the headlines. I mean, if the paper ever didn't get delivered to their studio, they wouldn't be able to have a show. But we go all over the world to get the voices that know what's going on. I was really enthralled by a piece that you did a couple of days ago, two days ago, titled "Turkey's Military Operation in Syria Exposes Former U.S. President Obama's Weaknesses." And you went on to talk about Obama's not enforcing his famous red line. Can you elaborate on what the ramifications of that, in your view now, CJ, are?
Exactly. Well, Assad began, you had a popular Syrian uprising against the dictator, which began in 2011, which was a carry-on from the Arab Spring, had spread into Syria. Syrians had had enough of the regime. They protested in the street. They were demanding modest political reforms, modest economic reforms. Instead of listening to the demands or resolving their demands, Assad began shooting protesters, torturing protesters, and having pretty much a nationwide crackdown. Now, Obama was asked at what point would he commit the United States military to intervene to prevent the further massacre of civilians in Syria. And he said that his red line would be the use of chemical weapons. Now, that was 2012 when Obama said that. The following year, the Assad regime carried out a sarin gas attack on a suburb just outside of Damascus called Huta. That killed about 1,400 civilians, mostly women and children. I mean, the world was privy to images of children choking to death on their own vomit and their own saliva, reaving in pain. Some of the most horrific images I think anybody who's followed conflict has seen in their lifetimes. So basically Assad called Obama's bluff. Obama blinked, took a step back. Instead of carrying through with his threat, he deflected to, at that point, the Republican-controlled Congress and Senate, and he knew that they would block his request for authorization of force. There wasn't even a vote taken on the floor because they knew they wouldn't get the votes. The authorization was denied, and Obama didn't go ahead with the strike. And we have a situation now where millions of dead Syrian civilians later, with 3 million Syrians basically cornered along the Turkish border, and with Assad and Russian warplanes bombing them relentlessly since December. We are where we are today.
So, CJ, it's your contention. Again, we're with CJ Werleman. He's a writer, contributor, columnist for Inside Arabia. Go to insiderarabia.com. Insiderarabia.com. CJ, it's your contention that had Obama gone through with retaliation when Assad did indeed cross the red line, that we would be in a different situation in Syria than we are today?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and certainly, I mean, we would have denied an opportunity for Russia to enter the conflict, and we would have had far less civilian casualties. You would have had a situation that Assad certainly would have used chemical weapons again. And we saw the fact that the United States, Obama didn't go through with his promise or threat or warning. Assad carried out another chemical weapons attack in Khan Sheikhoun in 2017, which killed about 140 civilians. So the dictator was allowed to get away with, some of the worst crimes ever carried out in the 21st century, and he continues to do so. And we can be thankful at the moment that, what the military campaign that Turkey is carrying out in Idlib at the moment against the Assad regime has provided instant relief to 3 million trapped and cornered Syrian civilians.
Okay, we're back with C.J. Werleman, columnist and writer for Inside Arabia. Go to InsideArabia.com. So, C.J., here we are right now. So Assad's not going anywhere. We got all these refugees. Erdogan, we all know what he did. And now he's released illegal migrants, or whatever you want to call them, migrants into Europe, letting them go to Turkey, using those as a weapon. Where do we go from here with Syria?
Well, I mean, you might be asking a question that's a couple of levels above my pay grade. Turkey has changed the battlefield in a profound way. For the first time possibly in 9 years, the Assad regime is being pushed back. Turkey has shown that the United States' excuses for not getting involved in the conflict, including the fact that they claimed that the Assad regime's air defense systems would be impenetrable. It would take overwhelming force. Not only would the United States need to back up an air campaign, they would need somewhere around about 10 to 30,000 ground troops on the ground to support that kind of military operation. The Russian air defense systems were far too superior. But Turkey took out these air defense systems within a 72-hour period. The Assad regime is on the retreat. It's now depending on Iranian militias to do the heavy lifting. And Iran really doesn't have interest in Idlib province. So that's going to be a hard sell for the Assad regime to bring further reinforcements. In fact, there's rumors that the Assad regime now is resorting to putting teenage conscripts on the front line in Idlib, so against battle-wearied rebel forces there. So this really does have the potential to change the entire nature of the conflict. As far as the refugees go, yes, I mean, Russia is using the refugees as a weapon. They know they can step up their bombing campaign again in Idlib, targeting bakeries, targeting schools, targeting hospitals like it has been doing. And the United Nations just came out recently and concluded that Russia is indeed carrying out war crimes in Idlib. So that can send refugees flooding into Turkey. Turkey sees these refugees as an existential crisis from a political point of view, and that's why it's threatening Europe to, using it as a leverage to get NATO behind its campaign in Idlib. So what the Trump administration does from here going forward, I don't really have an answer for that, but it has shown that with minimal U.S. Military involvement, had it come to this point, would have saved hundreds of thousands of lives.
Right. If certainly all President Obama had to do was follow through on the promise or the threat, however you want to say it. Sometimes there's a fine line between the two. On the red line, he didn't do it, and then basically Assad went forward, and here we are now in this situation. In your piece,
and also too, I just want to add to that. Trump's
yes.
certainly not blameless either. I mean, when Assad gassed Khan Sheikhoun, I mean, insiders said that Trump was so moved by footage of children choking to death on chlorine gas that it was the only time they'd ever seen him cry in the 2 years he had occupied the Oval Office at that point,
right.
And uttered the words "kill Assad." Now, he didn't kill Assad and backed down, and they end up just bombing an empty runway in retaliation. So, Trump like Obama, hasn't carried through with the fulfillment of intent.
Right. When he did those Tomahawk strikes, I mean, they were meant basically as a warning. I mean, they specifically, they warned the Russians ahead of time, so they got their people out of there. He didn't want any casualties.
Exactly.
But yeah, I remember that exact moment covering that, and it was actually his daughter Ivanka that brought him the photography of the kids choking and dying, and the president was very moved by it. You got to remember also, this president won a very tough primary campaign and took the Republican Party over, and I was part of that, as you know, CJ. And one of the tenets of his campaign was he was not going to get us involved in foreign conflicts. He was going to get us out of the Middle East and out of entanglements and wars. So it was tough for him because he wants to follow through on his promises.
But he had no trouble sending 5,000 troops to Saudi Arabia to protect the royal.
Well, yeah, I mean that's yeah, I mean that's look. But we also got rid of John Bolton, the neocon. But look, I hear exactly, CJ, what you're saying. But you got to remember, from the Trump perspective, many of us want one of the reasons we backed him was because we were confident he would get us out of these Middle Eastern entanglements, like he's doing now with Afghanistan. I don't know if it's a good deal. I don't know. I think the Taliban's crazy. I don't know how you can deal with them. I don't know what's going to happen. All I know is there's a vast movement in this country. We just want our kids to come home and they can figure it out. So, look, I get what you're saying, though, but the whole Saudi thing, CJ, is a total disaster. We're still supplying the war in Yemen against the Houthis, where they're bombing school buses and blowing up markets. I mean, the whole thing is ridiculous.
Yeah, exactly. And, it's a pity because you can't get this Congress or U.S. Senate to agree on anything. And you had a bipartisan bill sent to his office to end the war on Yemen, but because his relationship with MBS, our U.S. involvement continues in spite of that bipartisan bill to end the war there. And Yemen continues to be the world's number one humanitarian crisis, with hundreds of thousands of kids, in need of emergency humanitarian aid, hundreds of thousands of people, at the threat of dying from cholera. It's one of the world's greatest travesties.
CJ, there's absolutely no justification for the United States to still be in any way involved in backing either the Emiratis and the Saudis in the Yemeni conflict. We're still supplying planes. We're still doing reconnaissance. We're still giving them mapping. I mean, we're still giving them bombs that are dropping are made in USA. There's absolutely no justification for that. MBS is a complete thug. You saw the way he handled Khashoggi. I mean, everything the guy touches turns to crap. He's intemperate. I don't even think he's that bright. You got all these issues going on, but yet I mean, am I wrong? Everything the guy has touched has turned into a disaster.
No, you're dead right. Dead right. No, he hasn't been.
He's a thug,
and he's
and
he's damaged the reputation of the.
Go ahead.
Go on. Yeah,
no,
I mean, he's taken. His Vision 2030, which is a campaign to reform Saudi Arabia for the purpose of attracting foreign investment, has taken a massive step backwards. The damage, I think he's done irreparable damage to the Saudi brand going forward.
Well, and the promise they made to the U.S., remember when President Trump came in, he signed the deal. What were they going to spend? $50 billion or something? You know what they've spent so far?
No.
They've spent about 100th of that. I mean, it's all baloney. I mean, the guy is, coupled with the fact you got MBZ, I'm convinced, telling him what to do in UAE. So we have to continue this. We're coming up top of the hour, CJ, but we have to continue this dialogue because really the untold story in the Middle East is how screwed up this whole thing is with the Saudis. And remember, the Trump administration was banking on Mohammed bin Salman to be like the great reformer who would then go and parachute into Palestine and broker this deal. They don't want him there. Are you kidding me?
No.
Am I right?
No, he's exactly. He's trusted by nobody in the region. He just uses the power of the purse the power of the oil spigots to bully his way through into getting what he wants. But I think he's becoming increasingly isolated in the region for sure.
Of course, maybe we should be careful criticizing him, lest we end up chopped up with a chainsaw and put in an acid box, right?
There you go. We all have sleepless nights thinking about that.
Better not giving your email, CJ. All right, CJ, thanks for being with us. CJ Werleman, columnist and contributor for Inside Arabia.